Airplane hijackings don't usually end well, but some become legends. One story begins in 1971 when a mysterious man named D.B. Cooper hijacked the plane and disappeared forever. Another begins in 1999 when armed men forced an Indian Airlines jet into Taliban territory. Both stories shook the world, and both remain unforgettable. This is the tale of two of the most shocking hijackings in history. November 24, 1971, 2:50 p.m. A man in a suit, dark sunglasses, and carrying a briefcase walked into Portland International Airport. He had a ticket for a short flight to Seattle, Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305. He introduced himself as Dan Cooper, later misreported as D.B. Cooper. But he wasn't just another passenger. He was about to become an American aviation legend. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to a flight attendant. At first, she thought it was just another man trying to flirt, until Cooper leaned closer and said, "Miss, do you want me to open my briefcase? I have a bomb." Cooper demanded $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. He ordered that the plane land in Seattle with no police in sight. When they touched down, all passengers were released unharmed. Cooper stayed on board alone with the crew, the money, and a plan no one could have imagined. The plane took off again, heading toward Mexico. Following Cooper's instructions, the pilots slowed the aircraft, flew low, and switched off the cabin lights. Outside, the night was pitch black, battered by rain and strong winds. Then somewhere over the Pacific Northwest, Cooper lowered the rear stairs and jumped into the storm. No one ever saw him again. The FBI searched hundreds of square miles, forests, rivers, mountains, but found no body, no parachute, no briefcase. Years later, a young boy playing by a river discovered a bundle of decaying $20 bills. The serial numbers matched the ransom money. Over the decades, the FBI investigated hundreds of suspects. Many names surfaced, but none could be proven to be the D.B. Cooper. He became a folk hero of sorts, the man who hijacked a plane without firing a single shot, vanished into the sky, and pulled off one of the most mysterious crimes in aviation history. Even today, theories persist. Some believe he survived and built a new life with the cash. Others insist he never made it to the ground alive. But one thing is certain, D.B. Cooper remains a symbol of daring, escape, and mystery, and the only unsolved hijacking case in American history. December 1999, Kathmandu Airport, Nepal. It was supposed to be just another flight. Indian Airlines Flight IC-814, 176 passengers on board. Most of them on their way home to celebrate Christmas with their families. But only 30 minutes after takeoff, everything changed. 5 armed men stormed the cockpit, knives in their hands, a gun pressed against the captain's head. To send a message, they stabbed a young passenger, leaving the rest of the cabin in shock and fear. The pilots had no choice. The hijackers now controlled the plane. Their demand, fly to the Emirates. The aircraft was forced to land in Dubai. Some hostages were released. Children, the elderly, the vulnerable. But after refueling, the nightmare continued. The plane took off again, heading for Lahore, Pakistan. There, no one was allowed to leave, except for one. The lifeless body of a passenger who had been killed during the attack was thrown out onto the tarmac. Denied permission to stay in Pakistan, the hijackers ordered the crew to fly again, this time into Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. The destination? Kandahar. Inside the cabin, silence. Terrified passengers clung to their seats, not knowing if they'd ever make it home. Negotiations began, but this wasn't just between India and the hijackers. It was India, the hijackers, and the Taliban. Meanwhile, back home, families of the hostages crowded the streets outside the Prime Minister's office. Their cries echoed, "Save our children! Save our families!" The hijackers made their demands clear. The release of 3 imprisoned Islamist militants, $200 million, and complete legal immunity. For 6 tense days, the standoff dragged on. Media pressure mounted. Families begged for action. And finally, the Indian government gave in, at least partially. 3 militants were released. The moment they landed in Kandahar, the hostages were freed. After 8 days of fear, pain, and uncertainty, the passengers of Flight IC-814 finally returned to India. But one life had already been lost, Ramanath Saran, just 25 years old. And the consequences of that decision? they would haunt India for decades. Among the freed prisoners was Masood Azhar, a man who would go on to form Jaish-e-Mohammed, the terror group responsible for brutal attacks in Kashmir, Mumbai, and beyond. Thousands of innocent lives would be claimed in the years that followed. The hijacking of Flight IC-814 ended, but the shadow of that decision still lingers. So here's the question. Did India make the right choice, saving 175 hostages in exchange for releasing a future terrorist mastermind? Or was it a mistake that cost far more lives in the long run?